All right, thank you for attending our webinar, Tips for a Successful Fixed Asset Management Audit for Remote Companies. Today's webinar is going to be hosted by Assertive Industries Managing Partner, Karl Moody. To start us off, Karl, can you tell us about Assertive Industries?
I'll be happy to. Assertive Industries is a 27-year-old fixed asset management company that has expanded into other key areas, such as logistics as it relates to dealing with large inventories for manufacturing organizations, which, like Amazon and other large box developers of shipping and receiving. We have been involved in managing fixed assets for many large corporations throughout the United States and Europe and other areas throughout the world. We have been involved in building asset management programs for companies like Equifax, Whirlpool, General Dynamics, and many other large corporations throughout the world. We are specifically involved in providing systems, as well as we're providing the actual physical inventories and reconciliations and valuations of assets, in particular personal property, for all of these various types of corporations. We've been involved with all kinds of businesses, may they be from meat packing companies to companies such as NASA, which launching satellites and the like. We have been involved with companies which who are involved in high technology shipping. So we have been around for quite some time doing this type of business.
Thank you. So we'd like to talk about the reason we're doing this webinar, specifically in regards to the current state of affairs in the world and in the US right now.
Well, we're all faced with this COVID-19 pandemic, and that has impacted many organizations throughout the world and has devastated the United States, put a big halt on our economy. But as it relates to our business, it has impacted us in some very odd ways. Initially, most of our clients didn't know what to do as it relates to dealing with assets which were now becoming fluid, right? People were going into their offices at one time, and they were, being managed by networks that was, physically located in their location, and then they found themselves launched into a situation where a great deal of their workforce is now working from home or from remote sites, and that created a very confusing situation for those who are trying to control where assets and equipment lie. You have security concerns, you have audit concerns in terms of who has what and where. This has created some opportunities for us as Assertive Industries to be able to rapidly respond to this need. Clients have called us and said, "Hey, how could we best deal with these types of situations?" And we've always had our peer asset management systems, but we're now able to deploy our online asset tracking and controlling system where employees are able to actually log in and place their assets in service into our database, which the companies are able to rapidly see where things are as it relates to um, where their equipment now lies in various homes and other locations.
Thank you, Carl. Could you tell us more about the fluidity of these assets and how they relate to the increase in remote work?
Well, I give you an example. We have some very sensitive clients, which are very sensitive information, and now you have a great deal of individuals which are logging on from sometimes unsecure locations, trying to log on to servers which are secure, which maybe they never intended to. So the increased height of security has become extremely important. That's number one, but that's more on the IT side. But now you have laptops and other devices which are connecting to the network, such as tablets and even cell phones, which pose can pose a security issue. One of our clients, they used to place all of their asset tags on their laptops, but in very short order, they had to remove all these tags from their laptops because their logo was on the laptop, and they were frightened that someone would see that someone is working for that specific company because of they might be working in a coffee shop or working and not realizing that someone might be you know, uh, tracking them or taking a look at them and may, actually try to steal their laptop and make some attempts to get into their network. So that's important. Um, Security is one of the key components which are out there, and then you have the fact of, unfortunately, we had a large segment of the workforce that was immediately, taken from their environment and put outside into their homes and other outside locations. This creates another situation where many companies decided to flex their staff, meaning they decided to let go a great deal of their staff because now they either no longer needed them because their companies had downsized because of the workflow. Well, often what happened was all these assets flowed out of the company, and now these employees are no longer, some of them are no longer working there, and they had to develop ways and means of getting control or getting access or getting back that equipment. Well, if they didn't know who had it in the first place and who was leaving with it, that became a challenge. You are able to remove, employees from the network, but did the IT group prepare themselves for to take that equipment back? Also, what happens when all of these assets are no longer in service? Are they, do you have leases on these assets? Are you going to be able to maybe potentially and declare impairment because these assets are no longer be used again? And that goes for, a physical plant. If you have a building that, you had, 1,000 workers working there, and now you only have, 200, and you've been doing this for 6 to 7 months or however long, all that equipment sits there, and we need to really look into the aspect of it. Is there impairment? Do these assets lose their value because they cannot be used as they're intended? Well, if you have that impairment, you should be able to significantly look at your taxes and see how that might impact the depreciation schedule, or potentially taking losses, based on the fact that you have no more use or you're not using the equipment as it's intended.
Could you tell us some of the benefits that we've seen in the rise in remote work?
Well, you're always going to have the circumstance of uh, increased productivity for some groups, at least for the moment, right? Where individuals are able to maybe have a little bit better work home balance. They might have a great deal more control of their time, but you also have another situation where uh, that same scenario is impaired over time because you're going to have some individuals who are going to be more efficient because they can work in this manner in terms of working from home. And then you're going to have those which over time lose their cohesion because they need groups to work in. They need that interaction of colleagues. Now, when that starts to start showing showing the negative aspects of it is when you have individuals who are working longer hours because they now can get up and their office is right beside their bed or right down the hall, and then you're unable at that point to be able to manage the balance of the productivity of your organization. Um, that creates circumstances where you're going to have redundancy. You may end up letting some people go because they don't fit in the model of working from home or remotely. And if that wasn't planned for, that could have some negative impacts. However, there's a great deal of positive impacts as well too, because now a lot of individuals are not spending a great deal of time on the highways or commuting. That has some great value to the company. It has great value to the workers themselves. But all of these things have to be carefully weighed and balanced to see if they're actually benefiting the organization or actually being a deterrent towards cohesion, towards the way how individuals react to the goals and directives of the company.
Thank you. And going forward, what can we expect from today's webinar in terms of managing fixed assets remotely?
Well, one of the key components that we should look into is you know keeping track of who has what and where, keeping track of lost and stolen, broken, and returned items. That's always very important. Getting all of the assets together for an audit. I mean, how do you audit when you have assets which are in flux, right? Um, how do you make sure that you're able to, keep in compliance with your internal audit? If you are, responding to Sarbanes-Oxley's rules, if you are conforming to your responsibilities as it relates to a controller or CFO to make sure that you have some control over your fixed assets as it relates to personal property taxes or insurance or every other aspect that deals with the fact that your personal property typically represents a quarter of the value of your company. And when you have a quarter of the value of your company in flux or near to that point, you have to have some kind of policies and procedures put in place which you're executing to make sure that that you are properly managing such a large segment of the financial worth of your company.
Thank you. So, could you tell us more about the factors that make a fixed asset audit like this challenging?
Well, I mean, the first aspect is that you can't get to everyone, right? Physically. Now, there are tools that many IT managers use in terms of being able to run inventories across networks. However, those are typically run across closed networks, right? They're not run as it relates to going across the internet and finding all your assets because that doesn't work. Because although when a particular asset is like a computer or or a tablet or even a phone connects to the network, it does take your MAC address, right? So you might be able to recognize it that way, and be able to do some form of inventories as it relates to that regard. However, if the asset is not turned on or not connected to the network, then you have no idea if that asset exists or not. So if you take an inventory, a snapshot of that inventory at any given time, well, you may have a very large segment of your assets which are not online at that time, which would mean all those particular assets are particularly missing. Now, that can create all kinds of trepidation in the company because some of those assets may have, like laptops, may have access to areas of your network, which now you don't know where this particular laptop is at for that moment. So it is critical that, or who has it, or is it in service or not? So it is critical to be able to give the employees and those who have access to your assets the ability to be able to go online and go to a particular database such as Pure FA, such as our systems, and be able to check off their assets that they have um, assigned to them. And if they don't have it assigned to them, for them to actually enter their assets into the system so that there is some form of system reconciliation. And now there is an audit trail of where these things are. And remember that this could be everything from obviously computers and other network equipment, but it also could be furnishing that was issued to particular clients, I mean, to particular employees and contractors. Uh, as well as remote sites when companies have agreements with other companies to hold on to pieces of equipment. So it's not always COVID that puts challenges in terms of remote assets. You may have challenges to remote assets because you have issued tractors, trucks, other heavy equipment or manufacturing equipment to outside manufacturers to be able to manufacture particular items that you may sell. Well, at that point, when you make these large investments into these particular clients, to be able to produce, particular product for you to be able to either finish goods that you create or actually to supply goods to the particular market, you want to make sure that after the end of that contract or to make sure that those assets are being used to forward your organization and not being either misused or damaged or not being recognized as it relates to a personal property tax.
Thank you. All right, so why is it so hard, or why is it so important to keep track of the lost, stolen, broken, and returned items?
Well, let's start from broken. When assets are broken, were they damaged within their did they have warranties associated with them? If they had warranties associated with them and you have broken assets and they're set aside, and if you have 10,000 laptops, 2,000 laptops, 1,000 laptops, if they were under warranty and you had out of the 1,000, you had 150 of them were broken. And you never responded to that, that could represent, thousands of dollars of assets that should be in service, which are out of service, which in turn, the reaction or the uh, the instinct of most IT managers is to just purchase a new one, right? So now you're losing much needed capital to replace things which are obviously under warranty. When you're speaking about missing assets is a security issue. Missing, like how? Is it missing because it's been, as you said, stolen? Well, if it's been stolen, then if it's a cell phone, which might connect to the network, well, you need to report that, so that cell phone cannot be used because once you, identify that a cell phone is the MAC address of a cell phone that has been stolen, I don't think that you could put it onto anyone's network after that, right? And that relates to a series of other items. We want to make sure that if something is stolen, that we make sure that MAC address uh, doesn't try to enter back onto the network. Trying to use programs that will be able to infiltrate the network. And because maybe the network might have recognized that MAC address, they may have some advantage, maybe. Or if, now this is very odd, but, just to make sure that you don't have someone who is, clever enough to come into the organization and simply find a particular location because they've stolen a particular asset, plug into the main network. And because that they're plugged into the main network, they're now behind the firewalls, and they might be able to do nefarious acts because they're actually physically sitting in a wired area which is behind the firewall. Now, of course, many IT managers have put many stop gaps and protective and preventative measures to maybe to stop that. But hey, what if it's not? What if there's that one particular asset that could potentially breach the network? Well, then all of a sudden, that might represent hundreds of millions of dollars as it relates to loss of information, or hundreds of millions of dollars in potential liability because you potentially lost control over a particular asset. So when you speak about assets being lost, they need to be recognized that they are lost. If an asset's particularly stolen, and when I say lost, I mean if it was damaged, if it fell off a train, if it was it was completely lost. That's one thing. If an asset was stolen, then you need to take security measures to make sure that asset no longer can penetrate or have access to the network. If the asset is broken and you have a possession of it, does it is it um, does it have a warranty associated with it? Is there any way to recoup the potential loss that particular asset is broken? Or you just might make the decision that enough of these assets are broken, and you no longer wish to purchase from that particular company again, that particular brand or that company again.
Thank you. So you did mention the peer FA system before, and we would like to talk more about that and how that helps getting all of the assets together for an audit or coordinating an audit with remote employees.
Well, our peer FA system, which it's a product which has been in the marketplace for over 22 years, and it has helped many companies to be able to keep track and control of their physical assets, their personal property, as well as their depreciation. There is a component inside of the system that is online. Matter of fact, it is a complete online system now, but there's a particular component of it that allows for you to conduct physical inventories by virtue of individuals going to a particular website, which is a secure website, which is given to the employees, and they'll be able to view what assets they should have, where these assets are located. They will determine where these assets are located. So if I had a laptop or a desk or chair or any other asset, piece of equipment that the company owned, I would be able to say that, hey, now this particular asset is located in my home, or wherever I have this asset newly located. That helps the company tremendously. One really good example of that is there was a very large company here in Atlanta that had a tremendous amount of trucks, right? Now you would think that it was something like 40 to 50 semis, right? And they decided to park the semis in a lot in Atlanta. Well, all of those trucks, they did not have Georgia license plates. So what happened was, no one knew that those trucks were parked there, right? And the company is a very large company, was involved with making soft drinks. And what happened is that a tax assessor came around and noticed one day that all these trucks were parked there without um, uh, uh, Georgia tags, and made the assertion that All of those trucks need to have Georgia tags because they were there for a fairly long period of time, and Georgia wanted the ad valorem tax on those vehicles, right? So and they charged that company for not having Georgia plates because they recognized that those trucks were sitting there for several months. So the company took a charge for that. Now, that might be a very unique situation, or it may not be. But the critical component is, do you know where your particular assets are? Do they reside in various tax jurisdictions? And are you complying with the fact that you have assets in those particular jurisdictions?
Thank you. That leads us into talking about the tips that help Assertive run a successful fixed asset audit for remote companies.
Well, it's all, you have to follow some of the most simple ways of looking at managing anything in your organization first. Um, well, the first, one of the most simplest things that you need to do is to make sure that you have the intention to track your assets, right? And the next component is, how do you set up a system to do it? Now, you have some companies that will go as brutal, if you will, as putting it in Excel. That has challenges because putting in Excel may not give um, financial officers the ability to drill down into their assets, what they have and what's available, and that could drive purchasing decisions. Did I do I have enough particular equipment, or if I have various locations, you make sure you don't have 150 laptops in storage in one area and find out that you need 80 laptops someplace else, and you go and purchase 80 laptops and then have those laptops which are in the area which you have no idea just sit there and become obsolete on the company's dime. So, tracking the assets, putting together a database that is interactive enough so that an organization can take advantage of the aspect of from purchasing to tracking, controlling to tax advantages is important. The database is important. Then you need a way of tracking those assets, and using barcodes is one of the most efficient ways, which Assertive Industries completely endorses and have utilized for the last 27 years. Um, you have to make sure that those assets are tracked by the barcode number. You have to make sure that that database has the accurate asset tag number associated with it, and all the information is updated properly. Making sure that you don't have, in terms of the serial number of the asset, that you don't actually have the licensing of the Microsoft license uh, uh, serial number there instead of the proper serial number. Just make sure that you're able to inventory those assets in an effective and in an efficient way, which Assertive has been able to provide for our clients for over the last 25 years. So, you know, the aspects of keeping track and control of your assets is a fundamental need of any organization. Now, either it comes immediately or it comes 10 years later. It will become a critical part of how an organization deals with the fact that, yeah, up to a quarter of the value of their company is in equipment and plants.
And then talking about logging assets remotely in the peer-face system and in that database. Um, what do you feel is the outlook for companies going forward in terms of logging assets remotely?
I think that it's only going to grow. Um, the one thing that this pandemic has demonstrated to all companies worldwide is that the flexibility and the technology that allows for flexibility is here to stay. and how companies are now shaped and where people work, how people work has fundamentally changed. So now, if more important than it ever was, it is critical that since assets now are moving so fluidly, that is extremely important that companies keep track of their plant and equipment. May that be from trucks, may it be from laptops and furnishing, special equipment as it moves from here to there. It is extremely important that uh, corporations have a handle on their fixed assets, where they are, who has them, what is their state, what is their financial state, have they been fully depreciated, are they still in use, do they have a useful life still attached to them, are they still in the possession of of assets that should have been disposed of, and you're still paying personal property taxes on assets that you no longer have any use for, right? When you have disposed of an asset, make sure that no sensitive information goes out the door in terms of someone who's surplusing your equipment, to make sure that there's no sensitive information on that particular asset. Now, you might think that to be, obvious, but when you decide that you're going to get rid of 200 file cabinets, and your asset tags are still on the file cabinet, and someone finds one of those file cabinets in an illegal dump site, and your name of your company is front and center on that particular a piece of now trash, you now become liable, or could become liable, unless you could clearly demonstrate that you had no part of what made that particular piece of equipment end up in that illegal dump site.
Thank you. Moving on to our last tip, what's so important about reviewing the policies and procedures when it relates to a successful fixed asset management audit?
Policies and procedures are going to drive the way how you manage your fixed assets for today, tomorrow, and in the far future. Your policies are going to be able to state where, when assets should be purchased, how they should be purchased, how they should be recorded, how they should be depreciated, if you have various departments and cost centers, how do you make sure that the proper charge in terms of depreciation is placed to a specific department, to make sure that if you are placing benefits as it relates to profitability, as it relates to departments and cost centers, when you actually put charges in terms of equipment to that particular department, that hits their profitability. So it is important to be able to put together an effective policy that deals with uh, where assets are deployed, who has access to those assets, who is using it for what benefit, as well as is that particular asset in service, out of service? Is that particular asset obsolete? Did it get broken? Was there a tragedy such as a hurricane or an earthquake, and you lost those assets? Are they properly insured? Are they overinsured? Are they underinsured? All of this has to do with your fixed asset policy. All of this has to do with how you make determinations of um, uh, what is the best use of the equipment that you're deploying to best represent your company and also to best profit your company. So a fixed asset policy is just as important and hits the same areas such as your P&L, and has an impact today and moving forward.
Thank you. Going forward into the benefits of a fixed asset managed audit for remote companies, what would you say are some of the benefits related to that?
Well, If your company has made a decision, such as there's some various companies throughout California and the IT belt that has made the decision that they're going to no longer have facilities. They want all their workers to work from home. Um, well, if they had made large investments into plant and equipment such as desks, chairs, furniture, and other aspects, leases associated with um, their their personal property, uh, there's a lot of decisions that need to be made. Well, all your desk, chairs, and furniture may or may not have use anymore. And if that is the case, you need to seriously look into impairment. How to properly write off those particular assets moving forward. So that could represent hundreds of thousands of dollars, um, which you really need to look at seriously, because COVID and this particular pandemic has hit our profitability. All companies have taken some. No, I shouldn't say that. Many companies have gotten hit tremendously. If you happen to be Amazon or some of the other major companies, which seem to just fit perfectly with this pandemic, then you benefited heavily. But even those companies, with benefiting heavily from COVID, they had to expand. And when they expand, they had to acquire more assets. For Amazon, they're going into dealing with drones, which are assets, and that has an intense issue as it relates to it. What happens when if a drone decides to fail and hit somebody? Hopefully, you know who it is, who owns that drone, and who is operating it. I think that's going to be important. um, I think that making sure that individuals that you have rules associated to the use of your assets. And I give you an example, which a lot of companies haven't even thought about. If if I am driving in my car and I have a particular asset that corporate asset, which I have, and I'm driving, and that asset is connected to the network by virtue of mobile connection, and there was an accident with that particular car, and the person who was operating the car was connected to the network. Is the company somewhat liable for potentially, because the operator of the vehicle was distracted by something involving the company? So the use of the assets, making sure that you're not that potentially, if you are working in a coffee shop, that particular router is in that coffee shop is not you know completely occupied by malware. So rules of maybe where you can have your corporate assets connected to the network might need to be a part of your policy, and it needs to get out there, because if not, there's always new law as it relates to, and new liabilities that creep up out of any new way of doing business. And I think it's very important that the way how assets are treated, uh, how assets are deployed, be thoroughly analyzed, and rules and um, and processes be deployed to employees so that they best know how to keep the company safe.
And in terms of theft reduction and proper planning and budgeting, how does a proper fixed asset management audit reduce theft and help with the planning and budgeting for a company?
Well, the audit should audit the processes, policies, and procedures. That's number one, right? Um, how how do people enter and exit particular facilities that might be vulnerable to theft? Uh, you always have those situations where someone could hold the door open and somebody could walk in behind someone and find themselves roaming around an office, freely, um, taking pieces of equipment and leaving without the knowledge of security. So that's one component. The next component is in terms of theft reduction is to make sure that even if something is stolen, that it's not particularly related to the company. So if you have particular assets, it'll behoove, which are mobile, it'll behoove the company not to have the company logo on the asset tag or anywhere on that computer, as well as making sure that people didn't, have some elaborate password and they thought they should use a Sharpie and write their password on their laptop so that someone then could just access their network. Please don't tell me that that doesn't happen, because it does. So being in, dealing with theft and dealing with security, as it relates to your assets is very critical. It should be thought through, and it should be executed in the policy and during inventories. A statement of the auditor, such as uh, our auditors here at Assertive Industries, we give a statement about security. We give a statement about what we found in the field. Our findings report helps you to ensure that your policies and procedures are being upheld.
And also in terms of benefits, how does a fixed asset management audit help eliminate ghost assets and save money as well as time?
Ghost assets. And I'm assuming that when we use the word ghost assets, that they're assets that are not in service and they're sitting around, right? Um, and you're being taxed for those assets because you haven't properly disposed of those assets or taking them off of the records. Now, it is easy to state equipment. Right? Equipment is easy, right? You know that you have a ton of of used hardware and other pieces of equipment in a closet somewhere that needs to be disposed of. Properly disposed of. Hard drives, properly destroyed, and anything else that could hold data or hold any type of way and means to access your network is destroyed. But there are other components. Let's speak about things that no one tends to recognize, like carpeting. All right, uh, you have thousands of square feet of carpeting that you have removed, and then you put brand new carpeting down, thousands of square feet of it. However, no one sought to remove the fact that the carpeting needed to be the value of the carpeting needed to be removed off of the your fixed asset records. So you have the purchase of the carpeting, and you see, $100,000 for carpeting, and then you see 10 years later, you see $100,000 for carpeting again. Well, did you actively remove the first $100,000 in carpeting? You could have that. You have 10 years of carpeting over, which no one made the determination that they should have removed, um, you know, uh, 100,000, 100,000, 100,000. Now, the misnomer that most individuals have is that if something is written down to zero, meaning that it now has no book value, zero, that you're not being taxed for it. That's not true, right? The guy, I mean, most personal property tax, most municipalities have a floor, which if you have not removed the asset completely, they'll always charge you some form of taxes against it. So if it's been removed, and so let's just say on that $100,000, I'm just going to be facetious for a minute. Let's say you're paying, $60. Well, it might be 60 times three or four, uh, and compound that towards hundreds of different things that you may have not fully removed from your fixed asset records, which can be extremely costly. Add it all up, it could represent one whole worker, one salary of one person, or it might represent much more. It might also impact your insurance. you're looking at, are you overly insured? Because you might not understand that you have not removed certain assets that are on your fixed asset records that should have been. So in terms of saving money, removing fixed assets, as you will, ghost assets will save you money. It'll save you money as it relates to personal property taxes and making sure that you're not paying for assets that do not exist on your records, or obsolete assets, or assets that are no longer in service.
Thank you. So why is Assertive Industries a great choice for companies' fixed asset management needs?
Assertive Industries has the experience. The many years in service to our clients have yielded hundreds of millions of dollars in savings for these clients. May there be from tragedies such as hurricanes, and we had to come in and give replacement value for assets that have been destroyed, all the way to keeping track and control of some of the most sensitive assets that America has, such as the assets which are in NASA, and historical assets. Keeping track and control of them. Assertive Industries has been involved in companies writing their world-class asset management programs, as they coin it. We have been involved in companies which have been up and coming companies which have taken the marketplace by storm, and we had to come inside there and help them to grow as it related to their fixed assets. We have dealt with assets in religious institutions, which you have particular artifacts that's been in the possession of some of these organizations for over 100 years. Assertive Industries prides itself on being a resource as it relates to the management of fixed assets, as it relates to the management of warehousing, and as it relates to doing large inventories for manufacturers, making sure that they keep their assembly lines well tuned and moving forward, right? So we're not only the company of choice when it comes to managing plant and equipment, but we're also a valuable resource as it relates to doing annual audits, counts of supplies, and dealing with warehousing. And we are very, very confident that we're able to address any and all issues as it relates to the processes, procedures of, and actually the implementation of doing advanced audits and inventories for corporations such as yours.
We'd like to thank you, Karl, for taking the time to talk to us about doing fixed asset management audits for remote companies and how Assertive can benefit many different companies in a variety of industries. We also want to thank our viewers for taking the time out to learn some of this insightful information. And we'd like to offer an exclusive webinar offer, 20% off your next audit when you call and mention this webinar. Thank you again, Karl.
You're welcome.
Thank you again, our viewers, and we hope to see you again in our October webinar. Stay tuned for more information on that. Thank you.